So I finally got around to playing the new Astrobot game, and it's just as charming as I hoped it would be. This time around, you team up with Astro to explore this amazing theme park, with all sorts of different zones like a spooky castle and an underwater world, and each zone has its own unique challenges and puzzles to solve. I really loved how they used the DualSense controller to add to the experience. Like, you can feel the different textures when you're walking on different surfaces, and the graphics are seriously impressive. It feels like you're playing inside a Pixar movie. My only complaint is that some of the platforming sections can be a little tricky, but honestly, it's nothing too frustrating, and it just makes it even more satisfying when you finally overcome those challenges overall. It's a fantastic game that's perfect for players of all ages. If you're looking for a fun and innovative platformer, then look no further. Black Myth Wukong is a visual masterpiece with next-level graphics and environments so detailed and atmospheric that I felt like I was exploring a living painting. And the combat is just as impressive because it's fast-paced and challenging, with a deep moveset that lets you unleash some seriously cool combos and transformations to outsmart your enemies. I especially loved experimenting with all the different ways to fight and figuring out which abilities worked best against different enemies. While the story could have been a bit more engaging and some of the boss fights were definitely tough as nails, those are honestly minor complaints in an otherwise incredible game that any fan of action RPGs or anyone who appreciates stunning visuals and challenging gameplay should definitely check out. Cuphead is this super cool game I've been playing on my Switch, and it's seriously one of the most unique and challenging games I've ever experienced. The whole game looks like an old-timey cartoon, which is really awesome, and the music is just perfect for it. But don't let the cute looks fool you, because this game is tough, like really tough. You basically run around and shoot stuff, but the bosses are insane, and you'll die a lot before you finally beat them. It's totally worth it, though, because the feeling of satisfaction when you finally take down a boss is amazing. Plus, they added this DLC called The Delicious Last Course with a new character and a bunch of new bosses, and it's even harder than the original game. If you're looking for a challenge and you love classic animation, then you definitely need to check out Cuphead. Okay, so I jumped into Dragon's Dogma 2, and at first I was like, whoa, this is a little rough around the edges, because some things were glitchy and it felt kind of clunky. But you know what? They've been putting out a bunch of patches, and the more I played, the more I got hooked. Seriously, the combat is just so satisfying, especially when you're like climbing up a giant cyclops and stabbing it right in the eye. Plus, the world is huge, and there's always something cool to discover around every corner. And can we talk about the pawns? I love those little guys. They're always there to back you up in a fight, and they actually learn and get stronger as you play, which is really awesome. I will say that some of the quests can get a little repetitive, and the menus are kind of confusing, but honestly, that didn't bother me too much. If you're into action RPGs with a huge world and tons of freedom, you should definitely check out Dragon's Dogma 2. I first played Hollow Knight when it came out back in 2017 on PC, and I totally fell in love with it. It's this awesome 2D action-adventure game where you play as this little knight exploring this huge underground world called Hallownest. The whole game just has this really cool, mysterious vibe with its hand-drawn art style and atmospheric music, and the world is so big and interconnected that you're always discovering something new. The combat is super satisfying too, with tons of different abilities and upgrades you can get to customize your playstyle, and the boss fights are epic and challenging. I loved it so much that when it came out on Switch a year later, I bought it again. And it was just as good the second time around. If you're into games like Metroid or Castlevania, with deep exploration and awesome combat, then you definitely need to check out Hollow Knight. Little Nightmares 2 is a game that gave me the creeps in the best way possible. It's a puzzle platformer where you play as this little kid named Mono, and you're exploring this really creepy and distorted world with your friend Six. The atmosphere is seriously intense with all these unsettling environments and disturbing characters, and the sound design is amazing. It just adds to the whole creepy vibe. The puzzles are really clever too, and they make you think outside the box, and the platforming is challenging, but not too frustrating. I loved the first Little Nightmares game, and this one definitely lived up to the hype. And I can't wait to see what they do with the next installment in the series, which is supposed to be out sometime in 2025. Okay, so I jumped back into No Man's Sky, and wow, what a journey it's been. I remember playing this game when it first came out, and yeah, it had a rough launch with everyone complaining about missing features and bugs, but honestly, the developers have been working like crazy, and it's totally different now. It's actually kind of inspiring to see how much they've added. You can build your own bases, explore tons of planets with crazy creatures, and even fly around in space fighting pirates. It's like they took all the feedback to heart and just kept adding more and more. It's actually pretty wild how much this game has changed. Kind of like Cyberpunk, you know? Remember how that launched? Anyway, now you can team up with friends, go on missions, and even play in VR, which is mind-blowing. There's still a few little things that could be smoother, like sometimes the inventory management gets a bit clunky, but overall, No Man's Sky is a great example of how a game can evolve and become something really special. I haven't actually played this game myself, but my friend can't stop talking about it. It's called Pentiment, and apparently it's this really cool murder mystery set in the 16th century. You play as this artist who gets tangled up in this whole murder investigation and has to find the real killer, and the whole time it's like you're living in this medieval painting with all the characters and the music and everything. The story is super interesting with lots of twists and turns, and you get to make all sorts of choices that actually affect what happens and can even lead to different endings. It's a pretty slow-paced game, though, and there's a lot of reading and talking to people, so if you're looking for something with lots of action, it might not be for you. But if you like history or mysteries or just unique games in general, you should definitely check it out. Okay, so Sakuna of Rice and Ruin is definitely one of the coolest games I've played in a while, and it's not just a side-scroller, even though it kind of looks like one at first. You play as this spoiled harvest goddess named Sakuna, who gets banished to this island with a bunch of humans, and you have to fight demons and grow rice to survive. The combat is super satisfying with all these cool combos and weapons you can unlock, and the rice farming is surprisingly in-depth and relaxing. Like, I actually learned a lot about how rice is grown, which is kind of weird, but also really cool. The story is really engaging too with these awesome characters you meet along the way, and the whole game just looks gorgeous with its hand-drawn art style and beautiful environments. Honestly, the only downside I could find was that the platforming can be a little bit finicky sometimes, and the crafting system is kind of complicated, but overall, this game is a total gem. Silent Hill 2 Remake is a scary adventure game where you go back to a foggy town to find someone you lost and things get really weird. Now, personally, I love horror games, although this might not be for everyone. The town looks amazing, it's super detailed, and the monsters are really creepy. They made the old game look new, and that's cool, but sometimes you just walk around a lot looking for clues, and it can feel a little slow, like you're just wandering. But then Pyramid Head shows up, and everything gets intense. The story is still really good, and it makes you think about what's really happening. Some parts are super scary, some parts are just sad, and it's all very emotional. If you play the original game, you'll probably like this. It's a good remake, and it keeps you guessing until the end, and that's what a good scary game should do.